millions of animals set free into the waters of Burkina Faso. Not by accident, not by nature, but the direct order of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It was a scene unlike anything this country had ever witnessed. Boats arrived, not carrying soldiers ready for battle, but carrying life itself. Fish, turtles, birds, even rare species that had not been seen for decades. The riverbanks were filled with people watching in awe. Children cheered, old fishermen wept, and the young captain stood at the water's edge, pouring life back into the river with his own hands. Close quote. On that day, the rivers came alive again. The sun burned overhead, the air was thick with heat, and the normally quiet stretches of the Nakambe shimmered with splashes and ripples. For those who saw it, it felt almost magical. But this was no fairy tale. It was a deliberate act, carefully planned for months, with a reason so deep and powerful that the world is still trying to understand it. Why would a head of state release millions of animals into the wild? Was it a political move, an environmental mission, or something even bigger? To understand the answer, we need to understand the man himself. Ibrahim Traoré is not a leader who follows the script handed to him by others. Born in 1988, he grew up far from the palaces and meeting rooms of politics. His childhood was shaped by rural life, where the river was the heart of the community. It was the water that fed the fields, the water that sustained the animals, and the water that gave people their daily bread. He learned early that when a river dies, the land dies, and when the land dies, the people are left with nothing. As a soldier, Traoré fought on battlefields. But his greatest battles have been fought against hunger, environmental destruction, and the foreign powers that have long sought to control Africa's resources. Since taking power in 2022, he has refused to be the kind of leader who bows to pressure from outside. Instead, he has made it clear, Burkina Faso will stand on its own feet, protect its own land, and feed its own people. This act of releasing millions of animals was not a stunt for cameras. It was part of a survival strategy, a move to restore what years of exploitation and neglect had taken away. You see, Burkina Faso, like much of West Africa, has been facing a slow and deadly crisis beneath its waters. Climate change has altered the rains, illegal mining has poisoned streams, and overfishing has left nets empty. In many places, the once rich rivers have become lifeless, brown stretches where only mosquitoes thrived. The fishermen who once returned home with baskets full of tilapia now came back empty-handed, their boats rocking on silent water. Worse still, foreign mining companies, some backed by powerful governments, had been dumping toxic waste into the waterways for years, poisoning fish and killing aquatic plants. It was an environmental disaster, but it was also a security threat. Without fish, millions of families lost their main source of protein. Without clean water, disease spread faster. Without healthy rivers, communities grew desperate, and desperation fuels instability. For Traoré, this was not just an environmental problem. It was a threat to national survival. Months before the mass release, he ordered a quiet mission that very few people knew about. Teams of environmental experts, local fishermen, and military engineers were brought together under strict secrecy. Their task was ambitious: breed millions of fish fry in protected hatcheries, rescue endangered species from dying wetlands, and prepare for a massive coordinated reintroduction of life into Burkina Faso's rivers. Every step was planned with military precision. The goal was not just to refill the rivers, but to make sure the revival would last. And so when the day finally came, it was more than an environmental operation. It was a national event. At sunrise, a convoy of boats and trucks moved quietly toward the rivers. Soldiers in uniform stood beside fishermen in worn clothes, their hands busy opening crates and lifting nets. Cameras captured the moment Ibrahim Traoré himself knelt by the riverbank. In his hands was a simple clay bowl filled with tiny wriggling fish. He lowered it into the water and tipped it gently, letting them swim free. In that moment, the symbolism was as powerful as the act itself. This was a leader giving life back to his land with his own hands. One by one, crates of fish were poured into the currents. Cages of aquatic birds were opened, and their wings beat against the air before they took off over the water. Even small crocodiles carefully slid into the river, disappearing into the reeds. For hours, the banks were alive with noise, splashes, laughter, shouts of joy. Children waded into the shallows to watch the silver flashes of fish dart between their legs. For the first time in years, the river was no longer silent. But beyond the celebration was a deeper meaning. In African tradition, water is not just water, it is life itself. To restore a river is to restore hope, strength, and spirit to the people who depend on it. For generations, the rivers of Burkina Faso had fed its people. Now, after years of destruction, they were being brought back to life by the will of a leader who understood that sovereignty begins with the ability to feed and sustain your own. The international reaction was swift. Across Africa, young people praised Traoré for taking environmental action that most leaders ignore. Videos of the release went viral, showing not just fish and animals, but a vision of Africa taking care of itself. Environmental groups in Europe and Asia hailed it as a bold step toward eco-restoration in a time of climate crisis. But in certain boardrooms far away from the riverbanks, the mood was not celebratory. Some mining corporations saw this as a dangerous sign that young captain was willing to challenge the economic order that had kept Africa dependent for decades. For Traoré, it was never about making headlines abroad. It was about building resilience at home. Healthy rivers mean more fish for local diets, less reliance on imported food, cleaner water for drinking and farming, and stronger ecosystems to resist the effects of climate change. In his mind, environmental independence is tied directly to economic and political independence. Along the river, villagers expressed what this meant to them. An elderly fisherman named Issa told reporters, "I thought I would never see fish here again. Now I feel hope." A young farmer named Awa said, "The river will feed my children again. Traoré is giving us back our lives." And Kouassi, a youth leader from the area, declared, "This is more than fish. This is resistance. This is our leader saying Africa can heal itself." But the mission is far from over. Traoré himself has warned that without protection, this revival could be short-lived. Poaching, pollution, and uncontrolled exploitation could destroy the progress. To prevent that, he has promised armed river patrols to stop illegal fishing, heavy fines for polluters, and community-based conservation teams to guard the waters day and night. It is not just an environmental program, it is a defense strategy for the country's future. The truth is, what happened in Burkina Faso is bigger than one river, bigger than one country. In a continent where too many leaders wait for outside solutions, Traoré's decision is a reminder that Africa's problems can have African solutions, that taking care of the land and water is not charity, it is survival. It is also a statement to the world. Burkina Faso will not be defined by what it lacks, but by what it can restore. When the release ended that day, Traoré stood before the gathered crowd and spoke. His words were simple but powerful. A river without life is a people without hope. Today, we put life back into our waters. Tomorrow, we put hope back into every Burkinabe heart. And with that, the boats turned back upstream, leaving behind a river that was no longer empty. The rivers of Burkina Faso now flow not just with water, but with life, hope, and defiance. This was not just an act of environmental care. It was a declaration of war against poverty, dependency, and destruction. Whether the rest of Africa will follow this example remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. On that day, Captain Ibrahim Traoré showed that leadership is not measured by speeches in foreign capitals, but by the lives you restore at home. And for the people who live along those riverbanks, the answer to the question, why did Traoré release millions of animals into the river, is no longer a mystery. He did it because he understands that when you give life back to the water, you give life back to the people. And in the heart of Africa, that might just be the most powerful act of resistance there is.